All right, week 4 of the 2022 college football season is here. Today is Thursday. Got some games tonight, tomorrow night, and of course, the weekend games coming up on Saturday. I'm going to make 2 or 3 prediction videos for week 4 games, starting with this one right here. We're going to talk about tonight's game, West Virginia on the road at Virginia Tech, and then a couple of Saturday games, Clemson at Wake Forest, Notre Dame at North Carolina, Boston College at Florida State, and Georgia Tech at Central Florida. Let's go. But yeah, good morning, and that is Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and guess what? I'm live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also, in addition to that as well. Hey, make sure you're subscribing to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and believe it or not, some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know in the comments down below, but we are going to talk about some of the games coming up this weekend today. I'm going to give you some brief thoughts on my game, and then I'm going to give you a prediction on the game. I'm going to give you a winner and a loser, and I'll also give you a prediction against the spread. All right, up first, a Thursday night game. What is this? ACC versus Big 12. The West Virginia Mountaineers out of the Big 12 go on the road to Blacksburg tonight to take on the Virginia Tech Hokies. Two teams that are off to disappointing starts. Virginia Tech, brand new coaching staff. Didn't start out well with a loss in week 1 on the road at Old Dominion. They've rebounded with a couple of wins at home over the last couple of weeks, and they look to keep it rolling tonight at home against West Virginia. West Virginia, of course, lost back in week 1 in a rivalry game, the backyard brawl on the road in Pitt, the opening Thursday night of week 1. One of the best games so far of the entire college football season. The game coming down to the very end, basically decided on a couple of interceptions. If you remember, West Virginia threw an interception that was returned for a pick 6. West Virginia then marched down the field and threw an interception or an incomplete pass or whatever it was on the last play of the game down there at the goal line, and that was it, game over. They then turned around and lost a disappointing game to Kansas before rebounding last week against Towson with a big win. So 1-2 West Virginia on the road at 2-1 Virginia Tech. And West Virginia is actually a 2.5-point road favorite in this one. Now, there's lots of different philosophies and sort of strategies that people use when they look to bet college football games. One of the strategies that people like to do is called PTHD, Primetime Home Dog. That's basically betting on a small underdog at home when the game is played in prime time. The idea being that the home environment will be enough to swing the game from one direction to another. This is a low point spread here with the Mountaineers being a 2.5-point road favorite. I don't know that I can trust Virginia Tech to win this game, though. They have rebounded the last couple of weeks over some honestly pretty bad teams, and they haven't really been convincing wins. West Virginia, on the other hand, even though they have 2 losses, they're 2 really close losses that really could have gone the other way. Now, everybody knows I'm definitely not the world's biggest Neil Brown fan, the head coach at West Virginia. I think he's fumbled the ball there in his 3 or 4 years. He hasn't really elevated the program at all. Since he got there, their win-loss record has remained pretty flat around the 6-7 win mark. He needed a breakout year this season. It's going to be tough for him to get there. I think a lot of West Virginia fans were sort of demanding an 8-win season at a minimum. With the early season loss to Kansas and looking ahead down the road for West Virginia, it's hard to find a path to 8 wins when you consider the fact they still have to play teams like Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Baylor, who are all legitimate top 15 teams. Never mind Iowa State, Texas, Kansas State. A lot of difficult games coming up for West Virginia. In fact, this Virginia Tech game that they have this week is one of the easier games remaining on their schedule. Not really a must-win game. I don't know that there is a quote-unquote must-win game this year for West Virginia, but this is about as close as you can get to one. If West Virginia loses this game on the road in Blacksburg tonight, it's very possible they don't even make a bowl game this season. For Virginia Tech, on the other hand, it's a brand new coaching staff, so expectations are always tempered. You don't ever really know what you're going to get. With that being said, there was no excuse for them losing in week 1 at home to Old Dominion, and they've got like a 10-year contract with Old Dominion, so this wasn't a one-off. They're going to play Old Dominion every year for like the next 10 years, I believe. Virginia Tech better not get in a pattern of losing to a lower classification in-state school like Old Dominion. They got to turn that around. Like I said, a couple of wins after that embarrassing loss week 1, but not very convincing. Other than the fact that this game is being played during the week, which we do see weird things happen during the week. I'll be the first to admit you see a lot of road favorites losing during the week. Other than that, and the fact that this game is being played in Blacksburg, which is one of the more difficult places to play within the ACC. They have the whole Metallica deal with Enter Sandman at the beginning of the game. The crowd will be going nuts. There's no doubt about it. I just don't think that's going to be enough to get it done. I do think West Virginia wins this game tonight on the road against Virginia Tech. I think JT Daniels will have a great game, and Neil Brown, at least for the moment, will hear his name sort of distance a little bit from a lot of the hot seat talk that's been going around in Morgantown. His buyout is really, really high, too. It's about $20 million right now. So I'm on the fence about whether or not I think Neil Brown will be fired this season, no matter what his record is. We'll see towards the end of the year what that record looks like, and if West Virginia is able to maybe figure out a way to justify and afford paying that $20 million buyout. But I think for this week, some of that conversation will die down. I do think West Virginia gets the win on the road, on the arm of JT Daniels. And this is a low point spread here, 2.5. All West Virginia's got to do is win by a field goal to cover. So give me the road favorite here, although I hate playing road favorites during the week. I'll be the first to admit I'm not actually going to bet on this game. I'm just giving my pick for video's sake. But give me the Mountaineers on the road to beat the Hokies. All right, and some very interesting games on Saturday. I'm going to do 2 or 3 of these videos. The videos are too long for me to do 10 or 15 games in one video. I'm going to split them up into 2 or 3 videos over the next couple of days. Today, Thursday, tomorrow, Friday. But a few more games I want to cover, and we'll sort of stick with an ACC home game theme in this video here. But what about Clemson on the road at Wake Forest? Now, to me, this is a misleading matchup and a misleading game. People are high on Wake Forest, and I get it. They were a good team last year, particularly on offense. And when you look at their win-loss record, it's a lot better than what we're used to seeing from a Wake Forest team. I will be the first to admit that. Then you look over at Clemson, and people are down on Clemson. What's wrong with Clemson? What happened to them? This person's terrible. The offense is terrible. The coordinators are gone. Last year was a disaster. Was it? I mean, they were 10-3. If you just listen to people talk about Wake Forest and Clemson, you would think, well, Wake Forest must have won way more games than Clemson last year. Well, that's just not the case. Clemson won 10 games last year. Now, compared to what we're used to seeing Clemson do, yes, that was a little bit disappointing as compared to expectations. And that's what you have to keep in mind when you're looking at these types of games. What we think about a team is based a lot on what the expectations of that team were. So when you hear people talking down on Clemson, and then it dawns on you they still won 10 games, and you hear people hyping up Wake Forest, and you remember, well, wait a minute, Clemson beat them by 3 touchdowns last year with the worst offense Clemson has had in a decade. It sort of makes you pause and back up a little bit when you look at this game, because the spread on this game is Clemson -7. And you might be thinking, well, Wake Forest scores 40, 50 points a game. They've got Sam Hartman back. He slings it all over the field. Dave Clawson runs a unique offense with Wake Forest. It's fun to watch. They seem to put up points on everybody. Clemson, on the other hand, offense better this year than it was last year. Still not quite the Clemson offense we're used to seeing under quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, even Kelly Bryant, or going back even further than that. I will admit the Clemson offense still looks to be a step or two off versus what we're used to seeing. However, the Clemson defense is legitimate like it was last year. Wake Forest's defense is bad like it was last year. And when you look at this game last year and then look at where the two teams are at this year relative to last year, it's hard to imagine much of a different outcome than what we saw last year, which is a runaway win for Clemson. Now, this game is on the road for Clemson in Wake Forest, but Wake Forest has one of the smallest home field advantages, in my opinion, within all of the ACC. It's not a huge stadium. It's not a super passionate fan base, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way at all towards Wake Forest or their fans. I just mean in comparison to some of the other home environments within the ACC, Wake Forest would be in the bottom half, right? It's not like playing at Florida State. It's not like playing at Clemson. It's not like playing at Virginia Tech. That's all I'm saying. So the home field advantage in this game, although I do think is real and exists, I mean, Clemson's got to get in a bus or a plane or whatever they're going to do and travel from Clemson to Wake Forest. It's an unfamiliar environment. The locker rooms are different. The field looks different. The stadium is different. I understand all that. But in terms of the crowd affecting the game, I don't really expect much of that. I mean, whatever you think about DJ, the quarterback at Clemson, Uiagalelei is his name, by the way. We call him the ukulele, DJ Uiagalelei. Whatever you think about him as a quarterback, this isn't his first rodeo, right? He played an entire season last year. He had 2 starts the year before. He has played games and started games in away environments, hostile environments, whatever you want to call it, before. I don't think the Clemson offense is going to be rattled by the Wake Forest crowd. Now, Clemson's offense is not spectacular anyway, at least not to the degree that we're used to seeing. However, Wake Forest defense is that bad. Again, you think back to last year and everything that you thought about Clemson all year long, particularly, but also heading into the Wake Forest game, and everything you thought about Wake Forest last year heading into the Clemson game. Wake Forest scored half the points they averaged last year when they played Clemson, and they couldn't stop a nosebleed. Clemson's offense was the worst in the ACC last year, worst Clemson's had in over a decade, and it looked like an unstoppable offense against Wake Forest. This year in particular, Wake Forest has had an extremely hard time stopping the run. Clemson, the majority, at least, of Clemson's offensive issues, if you want to call them that this year, in my opinion, are in the pass game. I still think the ukulele DJ is the worst passer of the football they've had since probably before even Kelly Bryant. But they do have a legitimate running game, and they've been using DJ in the run game quite a bit. They've got Will Shipley, who might be the best running back in the ACC. He's definitely one of them. He's off to a good start. I don't know that Clemson's going to have to throw the ball that much in this game. They could choose to line up and kind of just pound it down Wake Forest's throat, with the idea being, well, they can't stop the run, and possessing the ball through the ground game chews up a lot more clock than possessing the ball through the air, where the clock stops with incomplete passes and things like that. So you get the added benefit. If Clemson's offense is successful running the ball, you get the added benefit of keeping Wake Forest offense off the field. And Clemson's getting a ton of players back in this game. Breezy was out last week, a couple of other D linemen, and some of that front seven that everybody was so excited to watch for Clemson this year. Several of those guys should be back for this game. I think Clemson's front seven in particular is going to be suffocating in this game. I think Sam Hartman is going to spend the majority of this game either running for his life, or it's going to force Wake Forest to make a lot of quick throws, sort of what we saw Georgia Tech try to do against them. Georgia Tech really not that successful doing that. I'm not sure how successful Wake Forest is going to be in this game either. The combination of Wake Forest defense being as bad as I think it is, and Clemson getting some people and pieces back defensively, and the ground game of Clemson versus the rush defense of Wake Forest is enough for me to pick Clemson on the road, not only to win this game, but to cover. I think Clemson wins somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 to 14 points. All right, now probably the most interesting game taking place within the ACC this week, even though technically not an ACC versus ACC matchup. Notre Dame on the road at North Carolina. Notre Dame independent, but plays a minimum of 5 ACC teams per year as sort of a half-in, half-out deal that they have with the ACC. Notre Dame has been nothing short of abysmal this year. There's no question and no doubt about it. They lost to Ohio State in week 1, 21-10. And really, you came out of that game, or at least I did, with more questions than I did answers. Is Ohio State not nearly as good as we thought they were going to be? Is Notre Dame a lot better than we thought they were going to be? You got to remember the spread on that game was 17, 18 points. Ohio State struggled, to put it mildly, offensively against the Notre Dame defense in that game, but in Notre Dame's offense could do absolutely nothing. You go back again last year, Ohio State's issue, defense, particularly couldn't stop the run. Well, Notre Dame couldn't run on Ohio State, couldn't throw it on Ohio State. The quarterback didn't look good. Buckner, now he's out. Notre Dame turns around the following week, loses to Marshall, and you're sitting there going, wait a minute, Notre Dame lost to Marshall, hung in there with Ohio State. Maybe Ohio State's not that good. Ohio State then comes out, puts up 70 points a week for a couple of weeks. So it's just been kind of a trying to use that Notre Dame-Ohio State game to forecast anything going forward has proven to be somewhat useless. But what we do know about Notre Dame is they finally got their first win of the season last week, the first win of the Marcus Freeman era last week at home against Cal, in a game that Notre Dame tried its hardest to lose. The game came down to the very end. Cal got the ball, drove down the field, threw a pass there at the end of the game. Incomplete, game over. Notre Dame hangs on, beats Cal for the first win of the season. Marcus Freeman now 1-3 as head coach at Notre Dame, 1-2 this season after losing as interim head coach last year in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State. Notre Dame's offense has issues. There's no question about it. Going back, if you listen to the Clemson-Wake Forest portion of this video, Wake Forest defense really bad, Clemson offense not that good. Which one's gonna win out? I think it's gonna be Clemson. You look at this one here, Notre Dame's offense not very good. North Carolina's defense doesn't exist. North Carolina's given up 100 points. 100 points. North Carolina's given up over 100 points through the first 3 weeks of the season, and they haven't played a Power 5 team. They've played 3 Group of 5 teams. Now, they've won all 3 games. They're 3-0. We're going to talk about the offense in a minute, quarterback Drake May. But the story of North Carolina this year, to me, has been their defense. Mack Brown has recruited at North Carolina, not top 5 level recruiting or anything like that, but if you look at the level North Carolina was recruiting at before Mack Brown came in, wherever that level was at, it's up here now. And a lot of that talent has been on the defensive side of the ball. And I, for one, thought defense would be the strength of the North Carolina team this year. They had a new quarterback coming in to replace Sam Howell. You don't know what you're going to get there. The defense has been non-existent, and the quarterback has been lighting it up. I mean, as many points as to give up 100 points over the first 3 games of the season. And it's not like one game they gave up 90 and the other game they gave up 5 apiece. They've been giving up over 30 points a game all 3 games. App State scored like 40 points on them in the fourth quarter or whatever that was. North Carolina's found a way to win because offensively, with Drake May at QB, they've been able to move up and down the field and just outscore opponents. So what's going to happen here when you have Notre Dame, a team that has really struggled offensively, both in terms of talent, scheme, philosophy, and moving the ball, you name it. They have struggled. Quarterback play, all over the place. Notre Dame has struggled offensively. North Carolina's defense can't stop a nosebleed. Which one of those two things is going to give? Are we going to see Notre Dame's offense finally look like it has a pulse, finally look like it has some sort of identity and game plan against a terrible North Carolina defense? Or will the Notre Dame offense continue to struggle? Will they continue to get well below average quarterback play, and that's putting it nicely, which will in turn make North Carolina seem like their defense is taking steps forward? I think it's much more likely that Notre Dame's offense has a good day and North Carolina continues to struggle defensively. Whatever you think about Notre Dame and how they've looked, whatever you think about North Carolina and how they looked, Notre Dame has played a more difficult schedule. They have played 2 Power 5 teams, Cal and Ohio State, and the Group of 5 team that they played is an undefeated Marshall. That is a pretty good team. In fact, a lot of people heading into that Marshall-Notre Dame game expected Marshall to win and don't necessarily consider that win to be an upset. Now, I'm not one of those people. I expected Notre Dame to beat Marshall. They didn't. When you look at North Carolina, they have struggled on defense against decent Group of 5 teams, App State, bad Group of 5 teams, Georgia State, and everything in between. 3 non-Power 5, 3 Group of 5 matchups for North Carolina. The defense has yet to show up. They can't tackle. They're out of position. Blown coverages. Can't stop the run. It's just bad across the board for North Carolina defensively. The game's on the road at North Carolina. Notre Dame is used to playing in big road environments. Okay, they play at Southern Cal every other year. They've played at Clemson. They've played in big environments before. The environment is not going to shake Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame goes into Chapel Hill and gets the win. Now, North Carolina is actually favored in this game as of this morning, Thursday. They're favored by 1.5. And a lot of people are picking North Carolina. Yes, North Carolina has scored a lot of points. They've given up a lot of points. Notre Dame, not scored very many, but defensively they've played okay. Holding Ohio State to 21 points is no small task. Ohio State's offense is legitimate. It's going to average close to 50 points per game over the course of this season, and for the most part, they were able to keep that in check. Are they going to be able to do that against Drake May? Well, who do you think's better? C.J. Stroud and that group of wide receivers with Travion Henderson in the backfield running the ball, or Drake May and his group of wide receivers? Who's better? As good as North Carolina's offense has looked this year, and I've been extremely impressed with Drake May, he's not C.J. Stroud in my opinion. I've seen C.J. Stroud put up ridiculous numbers against elite Power 5 defensive competition. I haven't seen Drake May do that. I've seen him do it and look really, really good against 3 Group of 5 teams. I think the level of competition that Notre Dame has played this year so far has prepared them much more for this game than the level of competition that North Carolina has played, particularly with Drake May getting his first ever action as a college quarterback against a legitimate Power 5 team in Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame bucks the trend this week. I think their offense has a good day, particularly on the ground. They've still got quarterback issues there. They've still got skill position issues there. But I think Notre Dame's going to get it going on the ground this week. I don't think North Carolina will be able to stop it. I think this will be a high-scoring game. I don't normally talk about over and unders, but the over-under on this game is 55.5 this morning. I would take the over. I think both teams are likely to get into the 30s in this game. But I'm going to take Notre Dame to not only cover, remember they're a 1.5-point underdog. I'm going to take Notre Dame not only to cover, but to win the game outright. Give me the Fighting Irish over the Tar Heels. All right, I've got a couple more games that I just want to touch on briefly. I'm not going to spend very much time on these because both of these games I expect to be blowouts. Boston College on the road at Florida State and Georgia Tech on the road at Central Florida. Boston College, one of the most disappointing teams in the ACC this year, in my opinion. They might be the worst team in the ACC. When you look at Duke sitting there undefeated, they play Kansas, by the way. I'm going to talk about that game in another video coming up here later this afternoon. But Duke 3-0, Boston College, horrible. I didn't see it coming. Their offensive line might be the worst in the Power 5. Florida State, another surprising team, but in the opposite direction. Florida State sitting at 3-0, and get this, all three of their wins have occurred on different days of the week. Sort of a weird scheduling anomaly for Florida State this year. They played, of course, week 1 on the Labor Day, Memorial Day? Labor Day. I get those two confused all the time. Florida State played on the Labor Day game. Big win for them against LSU. They then played a Friday game against Louisville, come from behind win where they outscored Louisville in the fourth quarter to win that game. And they played a Saturday game. They're now 3-0 for the first time since like 2015. So these are two teams that appear to be heading in opposite directions. Now, Florida State does have some tough games coming up. I think Florida State is good. I think they're probably even a little bit better than people thought. And clearly, quarterback Jordan Travis is playing at a higher level than we've ever seen him play at before in terms of quarterback play there at Florida State. I like Florida State skill position players. They're very fast. Defensively, I'd like to see them play a little bit better in certain areas. But I don't see any way they lose this game. I mean, they're a how much are they? 17.5-point favorite at home. That's a lot of points to be laying with a Florida State team that, even though I'm surprised they're 3-0, particularly with the win against LSU. I think I had Florida State going 2-1 through their first 3 games with a loss at LSU. They, of course, won that game, making them 3-0 and still instead of 2-1. But they do have some difficult games down the road when they start to get into the meat of their conference play. Not a must-win game for Florida State. A game they will win, though, in my opinion. I don't see Boston College traveling all the way down to Tallahassee and winning this game on Saturday. As far as laying 17.5 points goes with Florida State, I am a little uncomfortable doing that. I mean, Louisville is not a good team either. You got to remember they got blown out a couple of weeks ago by Syracuse, another sort of surprising team, at least in terms of their record out of the ACC so far this season. There's like 7 or 8 teams in the ACC, by the way, that are still undefeated. Just kind of a little weird side note there because people like to talk about how terrible the ACC is. So I'm not convinced that Florida State is back to the point where they're going to blow out bad teams. I'm not convinced of that. They were that for a long, long time during the Bobby Bowden era, late 80s, 90s, all the way up through really the early 2010s with Jimbo Fisher. I haven't seen anything from Florida State that makes me think they're back to that yet. Again, look at the Louisville game. Now, that was on the road during the week. Weird things happened. Most important thing for Florida State is that they found a way to win that game in the end instead of finding a way to lose it. Boston College back kind of against the wall. They're probably not going to make a bowl game this year anyway. If they lose this game, there's no way they're making a bowl game, in my opinion. I think Boston College can keep this game somewhat close for a while. I do think Florida State wins. I just am not comfortable enough with the Noles right now to lay this amount of points, 17.5. I think Florida State wins the game, but give me Boston College in the 17.5. All right, and the last one, Georgia Tech on the road at Central Florida. Central Florida is going to win this game. Georgia Tech is in a tailspin right now. They're just a terrible team. And what's even worse news, if you're a Georgia Tech fan, they're a terrible program right now. I think we all know Jeff Collins is out the door. It's just a matter of when. Will it be this week if they lose to Central Florida? It very well could be. There are talks going on behind the scenes at Georgia Tech right now within the athletic office and the boosters and things like that about potential coaching candidates should they decide to make the move and fire Jeff Collins, which in my opinion they should have done after last season. Very well documented, but this is his 4th year. In his first 3 years at Georgia Tech, he's won 3 games every single year. You just can't keep a coach around in a major Power 5 program. You want consistency, but you want it at the 7+ win mark, right? Even if you're Georgia Tech, you could probably stomach 8-4 for 3 years in a row, right? And you say, well, we're not getting any better. Yeah, but you're winning 8 games. You can't stomach 3 wins a year, 3 years in a row. But they did. They opted to bring Jeff Collins back, and so far this year, it has not worked out well. Georgia Tech 1-2, a couple of blowout losses to Clemson, and then last weekend just absolutely obliterated at home by Ole Miss. I expect the pain and the disappointment to continue for Georgia Tech this week on the road at Central Florida, who's 2-1 so far on the season. Not as good as the Central Florida teams we were used to seeing in 16, 17, or 17 and 18 especially, but still a pretty good Central Florida team, definitely a better Central Florida team than Georgia Tech. I think Central Florida not only wins, but covers the 20.5. I think all the noise going around about Jeff Collins possibly being fired sooner rather than later, not waiting to the end of the season, the Deion Sanders kind of talk, which I'll admit is a long shot, but still just having that out there, the theory or the rumor that Georgia Tech may be interested in Deion Sanders, or that Deion Sanders may end up interviewing or becoming a head coach for any Power 5 program or Georgia Tech. There's just a lot of distractions going on around Georgia Tech right now. I don't see Georgia Tech keeping this game close. I think they're in give-up mode. I'm going to take Central Florida to win the game, and I'm going to lay the 20.5. All right, there you go. There's some of the games within the ACC this week. Now, I'm not going to do like a separate video for every conference or whatever. It just kind of worked out for this video. There's a lot of other great games this week that I'm looking forward to covering and doing a preview and prediction on later today and tomorrow. Of course, we've got Tennessee and Florida, Maryland and Michigan, Arkansas and Texas A&M. Just a ton of great games across the board. Some great Pac-12 games even, which it seems like a lot of people have forgot about the Pac-12. It might be time to start paying attention again. Southern Cal, in my opinion, a legitimate top 10 team. Washington 3-0, Oregon State 3-0, Utah top 15 team, Oregon. There are some good football teams in the Pac-12. I don't know if we know yet if there are any great teams. Anyway, I'm getting off onto a whole other video here. Point is, hope you enjoyed this preview and prediction video. There will be 2 or 3 more coming out over the course of this afternoon, Thursday, and tomorrow, Friday, leading into all the big games for this Saturday, so make sure you check them out. As usual, I appreciate everybody watching, and have a good morning.